All right, let's dive in. We're cracking open the complete guide to business strategy design today. But no worries, we'll unpack the essentials of building a winning business strategy. And joining me to help navigate this is a bona fide expert on all things strategy, ready to break this down for everyone.
Absolutely. This guide's got a ton of good stuff in it. Let's make strategic planning less intimidating and way more fun, shall we?
Music to my ears. Right off the bat, they hit you with the importance of defining those corporate goals. It's like, before you even think about strategy, you got to know where you're headed. The guide throws out these big questions. What's your mission? What values are non-negotiable? What's the long game?
Yeah, it's all about laying the groundwork, right? And I really like how the guide uses real-world examples, like 3M's mission to solve unsolved problems innovatively. It's bold, it's memorable, and it just screams innovation.
Right. It's like this guiding principle, pushing them toward creative solutions. And then you've got Disney. They're all about making people happy. And that's reflected in everything they do, from the movies to the theme parks.
Exactly. It's that unifying force, that North Star. But the guide doesn't just stop at these big overarching statements. They get into the nitty-gritty of setting those 3 to 5 year goals, too. They've got this client ABC example, and it's interesting. They don't just focus on the financials. They've got goals for client engagement, employee development, even community initiatives.
Yeah, it's a much more holistic approach. And that's where things get really interesting, because it's not just about some internal targets, right? You got to figure out how those goals connect to the bigger picture, how they resonate with everyone involved. Enter stakeholders. The guide even gives you a sample communication plan, breaks it down by internal and external stakeholders with different frequencies and channels to keep everyone in the loop.
Communication is so crucial. I can't stress that enough. You can have the most brilliant strategy in the world, but if it's not communicated effectively, if you don't get that buy-in, it's dead in the water.
Totally. Strategy is a team sport, not a solo mission. Everyone needs to be on board, rowing in the same direction. So you've got your goals set, you've got your team aligned, now it's time to assess the playing field. The guide calls this situation diagnosis, figuring out where you stand in the market, what you're up against. Got to know the lay of the land before you start making moves, right?
Exactly. And the guide doesn't shy away from the tough questions here. It really pushes you to dissect the attractiveness of different segments. How much profit potential are we really talking about? What gives us an edge over the competition? It's about getting real with the analysis. It's like putting on your detective hat, right?
Oh.
What are the real opportunities out there? The guide really encourages you to think about profit potential in each segment. It's not just about market share. It's about digging deeper.
Yeah, it's about getting those details, getting granular. And the data is key. The guy recommends using all sorts of KPIs, not just financial ones. Of course, profitability and growth matter, but they also talk about customer satisfaction, churn, even product-specific metrics.
You've got to have that data, right? It helps you make those tough decisions.
Yeah.
So looking back, how have we performed in this segment? Where are we strong and where are the gaps? It's about understanding those nuances.
And I love the visual element the guide brings in here. It's like creating a strategic heat map.
Yeah.
You're contrasting segments based on cost advantages, differentiation, competitive intensity.
Visualizing it all just makes it click. Suddenly you see those patterns emerge. It's not just numbers on a spreadsheet anymore. It's about strategy. You see where you've got a strong foothold and where you're vulnerable.
It's like you're plotting your next move on a game board. And speaking of moves, this next section gets me fired up. It's all about those strategy levers, figuring out how to win, how to outmaneuver the competition. This is where it gets fun.
This is where the rubber meets the road. And they lay out those classic strategies, strengthening your position, shifting your segment mix, and making the segment itself more attractive.
Right, different paths to success. But what I find fascinating is they don't just focus on your moves. They want you to get inside your competitor's head. The guide even talks about anticipating responses to price changes, capacity adjustments, new service offerings.
It's like a game of chess. You have to think, if I were them, what would I do? What are their motivations, their strengths and weaknesses? That's how you stay ahead of the game.
It's about agility, being ready for anything. But even with a brilliant plan, it all comes down to execution, right? The guide reminds us it's not enough to just have a great strategy on paper. It needs to be woven into the organization, aligned with your structure, your people, your processes.
That's it, bridging that gap between strategy and action. Do you have the right people? Are your processes set up for success? Those are make or break questions. A winning strategy is only as good as your ability to execute it.
And speaking of execution, the guide gets into the nitty-gritty of turning those goals into concrete actions. The action plan. This is where the rubber really meets the road. Time to make it happen. No more theory, let's get practical. And the guide really lays it out there. Stakeholder buy-in, those actionable steps, and love this performance monitoring.
Right, you got to track your progress. And the guide has this benefits tracking template. Genius. It's about making sure everyone feels ownership, keeping things transparent, all the way down to each business unit.
Like giving everyone a roadmap, making sure they know their role in the grand scheme of things.
Exactly. And it's not just about checking boxes, it's about accountability. It builds that culture of ownership where everyone's invested in the outcome.
Celebrating the wins together, tackling those bumps in the road as a team. We've covered a lot of ground today, haven't we? But we dug in, found those gems of wisdom, and I gotta say, I feel equipped to tackle my own strategic planning now.
Me too. This guide really delivers a practical framework. I'd say revisit it as you go through the process. Use it as that guide, that roadmap to keep you on track.
And as you're building out your strategy, here's a final thought to ponder. The guide talks about aligning your strategy with your structure, your processes, right? But what about your culture? That feeling, that vibe that drives how things get done. How can you make sure your culture supports, even amplifies, your strategy? Something to think about. A huge thanks for joining us on this deep dive into business strategy. Catch you next time when we'll unpack another topic that's got you curious and ready to explore.